bottle into the glass and raised it to her lips. And just before she drank it, she said, "Take the wine, take that girl. Spill the wine, take that girl. Spill the wine, take that girl. Come on, come on. Spill the wine, take that girl, take that girl. Yeah, it's all yours. You gotta do it. Spill that wine, spill that wine. Let me feel, let me feel my head. Oh, Lord. Spill the wine, 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 spill the wine. Take that girl.
Goes to my head, makes me forget that I still need her so. Red, red wine, it's up to you. All I can do, I've got memories won't go. Memories won't go. I swung that with time. Thoughts of you leave my head. I was wrong. Now I find just one thing makes me forget. Red, red wine, stay close to me. Don't let me be alone. It's tearing apart my blue heart. I swung that with time. Thoughts of you leave my head. I was wrong. Now I find just one thing makes me forget. Red, red wine, stay close to me. Don't let me be alone. It's tearing apart my blue heart. Red, red wine, stay close to me. Don't let me be alone. It's tearing apart.
Good morning. Thanks everyone for joining us. I'm Denise Pinkston, founder and president of the Casita Coalition. And you are here today to join us for a series of webinars taking place featuring local jurisdictions around the state of California that are doing some really interesting programming in the realm of accessory dwelling units as a way of solving the housing crisis all around California in every neighborhood in California. Often the solution to a problem is right in your own backyard if you just think differently. And small solutions can make a big deal taken together over a place that's as large and complex and dynamic as California. And that's really the policy area that the Casita Coalition is championing, the beauty and power of small housing to make really big changes in the future of California. So thank you very much for joining us this morning. The Casita Coalition has begun working in partnership with financial sponsors to make these programs possible. including Union Bank and Facebook as our major sponsors, and also sponsors of the webinar series, including the Loan Depot Stowers Rogers team, Umpqua Bank, the Building Industry Association of the Bay Area, and the Bridge Association of Realtors. And we're also working with like-minded, mission-aligned organizations to share the word about small housing power and the ability of it to really transform lives and communities in a positive way, including the State Department of Housing and Community Development, UC Berkeley's Turner Center, the Association of Bay Area Governments, the Southern California Association of Governments, Build It Green, the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals, the Bay Area Council, SPUR, Faith LA, Faith and Community Empowerment LA, California Planning Roundtable, and Circulate San Diego. And I think as these promotional partners and sponsors demonstrate, people really want to help to solve the California housing crisis everywhere in California. And this is one tool that seems to be working throughout the state for many different kinds of families and places and geographies. And today, we're going to highlight the wine country in California, hence our introductory song. And begin with an introductory remark from State Senator Mike McGuire. Senator McGuire has been a terrific leader in California housing policy and a major leader in the legislature on wildfire recovery. He is the Senate's Assistant Majority Leader, chair of the Senate Governance and Finance Committee that considers all major housing bills that have to do with local government programming, and the Select Committee on California's wine industry. So we welcome you this morning, Senator McGuire, and we're really grateful for your leadership on housing policy, particularly as a way of disaster recovery, and for your embracing of the notion that small housing can really make a big difference without upending our communities and our neighborhoods in a way that they are challenged by. So thank you for coming today and welcome.
Hey, Denise, how you doing?
Good. Nice to see you.
It's really nice to see you. I am so thrilled to be with you. Thank you so much for allowing me to be with you, with everyone who is on the line. I know that too much of 2020 is snuck into 2021, but I assure you it is going to get smoother as we move forward over the next 4 to 8 weeks. And I just can't tell you how grateful I am to all of you who are on the line and to the coalition for your incredible work over these past many years, ensuring that we have progressive ADU law here in the Golden State. What I'd like to be able to do quickly is talk a little bit of recap of where we've been and where we've come, because I think there's been some significant progress. And then if it's all right with Denise and each and every one of you, quickly talk about where we want to be able to go, both on budget when it comes to housing this year, as well as focusing on proactive legislation. So getting started quickly, look, we can all agree that California's affordable housing crisis is one of the most significant challenges that this state faces. So we knew that millions of renters earlier this year were facing eviction, 4 million to be exact, before California passed one of the strongest tenant protection acts in the country. So earlier this year, we kicked off 2021 by keeping 4 million Californians safe in their homes through the end of June. And paying down up to 80% of back rent for small family homeowners, as well as larger landlords, about $2.6 billion to be exact. Those tenants who qualify for the $2.6 billion would have to be earning 80% of area median income or less. Those dollars will start flowing here in March, just a few days from now. And big picture, as we move forward, we simply don't have enough affordable housing units to be able to keep up with our demand. Here's what we know from housing and community development with the state of California. Number one, California needs about 1.5 million affordable units between 2015 and 2025. We know that the Golden State is home to 20 of the top 30 rental markets in the United States of America. And what we also know is that we're at the lowest home ownership rate that this state has seen since the 1940s. And thanks to all of you, thanks to Denise, thanks to the coalition, ADUs have now proven to be one of the quickest, most efficient forms of developing affordable housing in the great state of California. And thanks to your leadership since the passage of the initial ADU legislation in 2015, I want to give some statistics because we would not be here without each and every one of you. In 2019, for example, the city of LA had over 7,000 ADU permits pulled. That's compared to just 71 in 2014, the year before the first ADU legislation passed in California. Between 2018 and 2019, permits increased across California. In that 1 year, between 18 and 19, permits being pulled increased from 6,000 to 16,000. During that same time period across the entire state of California, ADU completions tripled from 2,000 to 7,000. And we also know that innovation, it's happening at the local level. And we need to give a big shout out to the city of Santa Rosa today. It was because of the city of Santa Rosa's progressive ADU fee structure that the state advanced a very similar formula, stealing candidly from the city, that ended up in legislation in 2019 with SB 13. City of Santa Rosa's fee structure model ended up being the model for the state of California through Senator Wieckowski's SB 13. And in Santa Cruz, this is incredible. The city of Santa Cruz now offers a $40,000 forgivable loan to any homeowner that dedicates their ADU for 20 years as an affordable rental. Again, if you want to search for innovation, look to the local level that cities and counties in California are advancing. And let's just be blunt. There is so much more work to do. We have to work together to be able to tackle this crisis. I'm honored to be able to co-chair the Senate's Housing Working Group with President Pro Tem Atkins. And I want to assure you that the Senate is advancing both a robust budget strategy and policy strategy for 2021-2022. Let's get into it quickly before Denise throws her shoe and kicks me out. So quickly. We need to be able to secure about $500 million in additional low-income housing tax credits. This is in addition to the $1 billion that have been secured over the last 2 years. These tax credits are critical to filling gaps with affordable housing developments. Number two, we want to continue with the advancement of Project Homekey. Project Homekey last year secured about 6,000 rooms that are now going to be converted to permanent supportive housing. We were able to accomplish purchasing 6,000 rooms across the state in less than 12 months at less than $150,000 per unit. So we want to secure an additional minimum $750 million going forward to continue with the success of that program. Now, you should plan on seeing some early action taken. We're not going to wait till June. Early action taken potentially on these two critical items. And then on the issue of legislation, I'd like to be able to highlight a few bills. Number one, Senate Bill 6. Senate Bill 6 streamlines the ministerial process for transforming dead and dying malls and dead and dying office parks to neighborhoods with housing and tax generating retail. The formula essentially would be two-thirds homes, 1/3 retail. And that would have about a 10% affordability clause in there. Local governments could go higher if they wanted. But again, ministerial process, if that threshold could be accomplished 2/3, 1/3. I'd like to talk about SB 9 because SB 9 is following your great leadership in this state. SB 9 is focused on duplexes and fourplexes. SB 9 is being advanced by Senator Atkins. It encourages small-scale infill development in neighborhoods spearheaded by homeowners with a ministerial approval of duplexes and fourplexes. So here's how it would work. Number one, it would allow a one-time transition of a single-family home to a duplex. If the local government, the city or county, allows for another single-family home to be built behind that original single-family home, then a second duplex could be built, turning that into a fourplex. All local zoning still applies, floor area ratio, setbacks, height, etc. But it allows to be able to move quickly and eloquently with infill neighborhood development. I'd like to move to the next bill. This is Senate Bill 7, also Senator Atkins. This renews CEQA expediting when it comes to potential lawsuits. So originally the legislature passed AB 900. That was for large projects, clean energy projects, stadiums, arenas, anything over 100 million in those categories. Well, it would provide those projects a 270-day judicial review in the California court system if there was a CEQA challenge. We are now going to advance this for housing. For any housing project, 15 million gross costs or up would still be guaranteed that 270-day judicial review on a potential CEQA lawsuit. Senate Bill 10 is critical. That's Senator Weiner. Senate Bill 10, this is optional, I might add, gives city councils, boards of supervisors the ability to approve up to 10 units of market rate and or affordable housing infill, up to 10 units ministerially. It has to be infill. It is not a mandate, but it would be a tool in city council or board of supervisors belt that they could advance for market rate and or affordable housing up to 10 units infill. Finally, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Denise, we're going to be advancing a new affordable housing bond. Right now, we're in intense discussions about what the value of that bond will be, total value, and you should expect to see that affordable housing bond on the 2022 ballot. We're working with stakeholders from across the state, and obviously we're going to need to engage the governor and the assembly to be able to determine what that final dollar amount will be for the affordable housing bond. Denise, I'm going to turn it back to you. And again, no BS. I want to say thank you. Because truly, the coalition has been incredible at moving common sense, progressive housing legislation forward, focused on the issue of accessory dwelling units. And we just want to say how grateful we are for your fantastic work.
Thank you so much for joining us today, for all your leadership on housing and local government issues in the Senate. We wouldn't be where we are without people like you in the state legislature who are willing to really unleash the power of homeowners to help solve the state's housing crisis. And I appreciate what you've done in ADUs and also the follow-on bills to enable homeowners to pursue duplexes and these other housing forms. I think probably Turner Center for Housing Innovation now says California is now over the 20,000 unit mark from the state ADU law in less than 3 years. I think when the dust settles 5 years from now and we look back, these ADU laws and hopefully the follow-on duplex quad laws will be the most transformational, most productive housing laws we've done. And they don't involve public subsidy, and the math works on small housing that's affordable. So I think we'll find that small really is a big deal, and we appreciate your leadership in that space. Hey, one plug before we lose you.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Think about ADU financing or loan guarantees in that bond, because now that we've taken care of a lot of zoning barriers, the next big barrier to a lot of homeowners is lack of capital, because banks won't underwrite the ADU income stream if the unit doesn't exist. And if the state can help us thread that needle without taking away a lot of money from ELI, VLI housing that really needs the subsidy, that would be great.
No, you're absolutely right, Denise, and I don't want to take away from your agenda, but very quickly, quick response to that is you're absolutely right. We need to be creative in regards to the financing. Again, if you take a look at how many units have been deployed and what will be deployed in the months and years to come, it's critical. One of the biggest issues holding us back is the money available to be able to get them built. You're absolutely right. I promise you that's going to be looked at. And I think the other issue of ADUs, duplexes, fourplexes, and let's just be candid and call it out. Anytime you're doing a housing law, a housing bill, it's incredibly controversial. And there are a lot of opinions, rightfully so. And especially when you're looking at infill, neighborhood-driven development, it's much more eloquent and you can deploy it quicker, more efficiently, and get more units on the ground. So I think it's absolutely critical that we continue the good work that you've all started and promise you that we'd love to follow up on all issues of financing.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. I speak for everyone on the call to say we are incredibly grateful that you're there. taking care of your district, which is most of Northern California, north of parts of Sonoma, and really making sure that these laws are there, that they're protected, and that they continue to work. So thank you so much. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you,
Take care.
Denise. Thanks for having us.
Our pleasure. Everyone says thank you on the chat. Hey, so, well, that was a terrific and inspiring start to the day. And now I'd like to introduce our best featured speakers for today's Best Practices webinar, who will tell us how they're doing it in Napa and Sonoma. Today's presentations are a little unusual. We have the Katrina Braehmer and Nina Bellucci from Permit Sonoma. They are the boots on the ground current planning leaders that are developing new and better policies and implementing them with homeowners on a daily basis through the permit process. We also have Renee Schomp from Napa Sonoma ADU, which is an unusual partnership of local government and philanthropy to create a nonprofit that supports homeowners and the work of local government by ensuring that that the loose ends are tied up neatly and that homeowners get what they need, they get the technical assistance and support that they need, and they are coordinating with their local government partners to roll out ADUs as a powerful and productive form of small housing. So I believe in the presentations today, we're going to hear first from Renee, the Executive Director of Napa Sonoma ADU, followed by Katrina Braehmer and Nina Bellucci from Sonoma County Planning Division. So with that, Renee, do you want to take it away and get going on your presentation?
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming today.
Thank you so much, Denise. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Alrighty. Are you seeing that?
Not yet, but I have faith.
Let's see here. There we go. How's that?
There we go. Perfect.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much, Denise. Thank you so much to the whole Casita Coalition for inviting us to join you all today from the North Bay. And also thank you so much to Senator McGuire for your wonderful leadership. My name is Renee, and I'm the director of the Napa Sonoma ADU Center. And before I came to this role, my background was actually as a legal aid attorney in the Bay Area. I happened to move back home to Sonoma County from Oakland right at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it was in April that I became the first director of the nonprofit Napa Sonoma ADU Center. I moved into a 720 square foot, 2-bedroom above garage ADU with my husband on my mother's property here in West Sonoma County. And we wouldn't be able to reasonably afford to live here in Sonoma County if it wasn't for our ADU. My 77-year-old mother, who's a retired public school teacher, also wouldn't be able to afford to age in place without this ADU, which helps her cover her monthly mortgage payments. Thanks to my personal experience, I'm all the more cognizant of the important role that ADUs play to help resolve our housing crisis in Napa and Sonoma counties, as well as throughout California. Before I get started, I also want to take a moment to introduce my colleague, Scott Johnson, who is a consultant who works with us as our ADU expert at our nonprofit, providing on-the-ground guidance and support to local homeowners on their ADU projects. And you'll have a chance to meet Scott during the Q&A portion of the webinar today. So I'm going to be covering a little bit about our nonprofit and how we support local homeowners, as well as how we support local government across the 16 jurisdictions in Napa and Sonoma counties. And then I'm looking forward to answering your questions during the Q&A later. A little more about us. The mission of Napa Sonoma ADU Center is to help homeowners build ADUs as a means of increasing housing affordability in Napa and Sonoma counties. This means, like I mentioned, we work across all 16 of the different jurisdictions in the 2 counties, both in the cities and in the unincorporated county areas. Napa Sonoma ADU is a fiscally sponsored project of Napa Valley Community Foundation with support from Community Foundation Sonoma County. And we also have support from the cities of Calistoga and Napa and the County of Napa, as well as others. We collaborate with local jurisdictions, nonprofits, and the private sector to best serve our community. And we're a new nonprofit navigating our launch since April during both COVID and wildfires, and also during the welcome rollout of the January 2020 state ADU laws. We launched Napa Sonoma ADU after conducting a series of surveys, data gathering, and focus groups with local city and county staff, builders and architects, as well as homeowners who have built ADUs or were interested in doing so in the future. And we heard some key things from homeowners. First of all, they had a lot of fear of scrutiny from their local planning and building departments and about the permitting process in general. Plus, they felt adrift and overwhelmed by the ADU process and felt they would really benefit from a little more guidance to really just catalyze their projects. We also heard some key things from local government. So a lot of them recognize the importance of ADUs as a part of the solution for our local housing crisis, but they really struggled with keeping up with new and changing state ADU laws, as well as with proactively educating homeowners about ADUs. And in particular, you have to think about the size of the different jurisdictions up here in Napa and Sonoma counties. Some of them are a smaller city that have, one planning and building director and one building official, for example. So based on this information, plus market research in Napa and Sonoma counties, including a demographic analysis and an assessment of data such as the volume of homeowners with underutilized homes, as well as the amount of existing equity in the primary residence and other multiple key factors, we determined there was significant potential in terms of the volume of ADUs and junior ADUs that could be built here. A jurisdiction survey identified almost 2,000 ADUs across the two counties, and the total number is likely much higher because of the survey's methodological limits. And we estimate that there's potential for about 200,000 ADUs to be built across the two counties. There's also a high volume, like I mentioned, of homeowners with significant equity. Approximately 90% of homeowners have at least 25% equity in their homes. So some of the most common local homeowner goals here are similar to what you'll see across the state. There's a big emphasis for folks on the fact that an ADU can be flexible and they can have both short and long-term goals. So they could have the ADU as a rental unit for now and possibly house family in the future. Oftentimes we have folks across two kind of peaks in terms of demographics, in terms of age. So we see folks at a peak in their mid-30s generally, often interested in building an ADU for an aging parent, but using it as a rental property at other times. And then another folks in their late 60s who are post-retirement planning to be able to age in place. To put this conversation in context, a little bit about ADU trends in our community over the past several years. As you can see here, there have been spikes in ADUs thanks to the California state laws that you're all familiar with. So in 2019, we saw about 300 ADUs permitted across all 16 jurisdictions in Napa and Sonoma counties. So in order to increase these trends, we launched a number of homeowner ADU education resources and tools this year. The firm Baird & Driscoll Community Planning developed many of the tools and resources on our website and also is facilitating the work that we're doing on process improvements and pre-approved ADU plans with the local government up here. I'm going to share a little bit more about that local government work in a moment. But first, a little bit of a deep dive into some of our key tools that we use for some of that proactive homeowner education and engagement that we know is so important. So we have an ADU workbook tool, which helps homeowners in Napa and Sonoma counties through A to Z, the ADU planning, designing, permitting, building, and rental process. We have an ADU calculator tool, which helps homeowners estimate the cost, returns, and benefits associated with building an ADU. We have an address lookup tool, which helps homeowners identify if they can build an ADU or junior ADU on their property. And of course, thanks to the new state laws, now more often than not, the answer is yes. And then our nonprofit also provides direct support to homeowners. So we answer their ADU questions throughout their ADU journey. And in order to ensure that we provide accurate information that's based on the various ADU local rules across all 16 jurisdictions in Napa and Sonoma counties, we have wonderful liaisons at each jurisdiction who we can reach out to with questions as needed. And you're going to meet my liaison at Permit Sonoma, Katrina, here in a minute. We also recently launched Facebook groups to support homeowners in our two larger cities up here in Napa and Santa Rosa to see if we could start to develop an active community for peer-to-peer learning about ADUs. This was actually based on inspiration from a program on ADUs in the city of Boston that saw there was a lot of kind of emotional and also logistical support that homeowners on a peer-to-peer basis could provide to each other. So we're excited about that and currently piloting it. More customized support that we provide to homeowners is our ADU feasibility consultations. So you're going to meet my colleague Scott Johnson during the Q&A. He does these for us on the ground. And basically we do a deep dive into pre-screening of a homeowner's parcel, and then we do a site visit where we look at site-specific characteristics. We talk to them about what their ADU goals are. We kind of provide some of that in-person support right at the beginning of a project to catalyze them from thought to action. And we end up sending them a report that illustrates for them our recommendations for their ADU project based on a consideration and analysis of their goals, the characteristics of their parcel, their budget, and a number of other factors. And we also tell them, here's what your next steps are going to be. Here's what your local ADU rules are. Here's how things work in your jurisdiction. And here's the professional team that we think you'll need based on what your project recommendations are. We also have a number of ADU webinars, and some of our greatest successes so far are these webinars because they're a really excellent way to get the word out within the community proactively about ADUs. For a lot of them, we partner with the local planning and building divisions at the jurisdictions as a means of engaging homeowners in a really concrete way. And here on this slide, you can see a sampling of recent webinars that we've held. Some focus on particular ADU subjects like ADU financing, and some are, like I mentioned, really in partnership with staff at one jurisdiction's planning and building division, so we can help demystify for local residents what their local development standards are and what the full planning, permitting, and building process will look like in their jurisdiction. It also helps put a face to the staff at the planning and building divisions and helps kind of make people feel a little bit less anxious about that scrutiny that I was talking about earlier, or the just how opaque the process often feels to homeowners. A little bit about our ADU Home Match program. So ADU Home Match focuses on tenant recruitment and placement in local existing ADUs. It's in partnership with the local nonprofit Burbank Housing. And the goal of this project is to encourage homeowners in Napa and Sonoma counties who already have ADUs or who build ADUs coming out of our feasibility consultations and other homeowner support, to encourage them to rent to tenants who live at or below 65% of area median income. And the incentives for homeowners to do this through our project, beyond simply helping their community, is that in exchange for doing so, landlords will benefit from a few benefits. So thoughtful screening of potential tenants conducted by our team at Burbank Housing, our partner nonprofit, a tailored identification of 2 to 3 tenants for them to match with and interview, and then access to a free landlord best practices training, a lease agreement form, an ADU landlord helpline for assistance with any questions that arise for them over the course of their year enrolled in the program, Monday through Friday, and then up to $2,500 of loss coverage for 1 month of lost rent or security deposit overages. And then we're also working on, recognizing that ADUs are an important source of wealth building for homeowners. So in addition to working with ADU homeowners who can afford to rent out their units for less to lower income tenants, we're also interested in identifying ways that we can help homeowners who might struggle financially to build an ADU, but would benefit most from the return on that investment. So to that end, we're working with a local lender to consider a new ADU financial product that will make it easier for homeowners to finance building an ADU who might otherwise not be able to do so. We're also currently doing race and wealth equity work focused on ensuring that we're providing thoughtful and impactful support to Spanish-speaking Latinx and/or undocumented homeowners, intersections of which are one of the larger demographics in our community in Napa and Sonoma counties. So we're currently engaging this community in a series of focus groups and interviews to identify how we can better serve them. And we ensure that our webinars, website, and services are available in Spanish. So now a little bit more about how we're working with local government. You already heard Senator McGuire give Santa Rosa a much deserved shout out for their excellent work on ADUs. And I would be remiss if I didn't also take a moment to give the city of Napa a shout out for their Junior Unit Initiative program, which provides project support and financial support to local homeowners who build affordable ADU interior conversions and junior ADUs. So we're really lucky here in Napa and Sonoma Counties to have a lot of really wonderful jurisdictions like Santa Rosa, like Napa, like Sonoma County, who you'll be hearing from in a moment, and others. And we've brought them all together in this ADU Accelerator program. And almost all 16 of the jurisdictions have joined. And it's an opportunity for our nonprofit to work collaboratively with the local planning and building divisions across the two counties and all of the incorporated cities. And it's also a chance to get those jurisdictions speaking with and learning from each other even more, especially the folks who are working on ADUs. And we're really hoping to encourage more uniform processes as well as peer-to-peer learning. So a little bit about that work in more detail. One of the key elements of the ADU Accelerator is to help local jurisdictions streamline and improve their ADU processes on the ground. And we hope that this will both make it easier for homeowners to navigate the ADU process and also reduce the local staff time needed to expend on the planning, permitting, and building process. So we have 6 key recommendations for the local jurisdictions that we're going to be sharing with all of them shortly. Again, we're in our first year as a nonprofit, so we're right in the mix right now of rolling out all of our programming. And our recommendations, in short, are first to improve and simplify public information. So we really want to help them upgrade their publicly facing materials about ADUs. And then also we want them to leverage the benefit of existing resources that our nonprofit has to offer. And this is something that a lot of the jurisdictions already do. They link from their city website or county website to our ADU calculator tool that I mentioned earlier, to our website. We often have government staff who focus on ADUs referring homeowners to us and saying, actually, you're right at like the ADU 101 stage. There's a lot for you to learn up front before it'll be as helpful for you to even talk to me. Talk to Renee, talk to the Napa Sonoma ADU Center first, and they can give you a really helpful primer and set you up for success when you come back to talk to me. We're also recommending that they strengthen their alignment on ADUs. So ensure that staff who engage with the public are aligned on the importance and priority of ADUs, and even maybe create a public facing mission statement that indicates the government's support of ADUs. And then we also recommend that they have a really clear and easy to visually understand ADU and junior ADU webpage. So we're working with them on template materials and specifics to help them develop that resource so that when you are, as a local homeowner, just Googling ADU in your city, you come up with something that's really helpful and proactive in taking you down the next steps. Similarly, we recommend that they develop handouts on a number of ADU matters, including specific issue one-pagers. And this is something that we think will really help guide homeowners in a concrete way, because right now directing a layperson to an ordinance is tough in terms of getting to take those proactive action steps and really understand the process. And then finally, we recommend that there be staff training and alignment on ADUs within each jurisdiction. So making sure that everyone from the planning director to the clerks and folks in plan check who are dealing more on the ground with ADUs are aligned on what the new state laws are, what their new revised local ordinances are, and what their priorities and processes are with regard to ADUs. Then in addition, through our ADU Accelerator program, we're working on pre-approved plans. So we're currently right in the middle of a co-design process with the jurisdictions across Napa and Sonoma counties to develop a uniform pre-approved ADU plans program. So all 16 jurisdictions are invited. And right now, about 6, including the larger jurisdictions in the region, are the most deeply involved in this initial deep design work for it. And that includes Permit Sonoma, who's on the webinar with us today. And then other jurisdictions have said, we have one person in our planning department, so we would love to hear what you come up with, and then we can identify whether or not we can join in. So we're really hopeful that as many of the 16 jurisdictions as possible will ultimately engage in the program. And I'm really eager to see how this works in practice so that we can share it with others for replication if it's a success. I'm also curious to see if this could be a step towards statewide or larger regional pre-approved plans programs in California. So a little overview of the program. The initial plan is that homeowners would pay maybe a $1,000 fee to an architect whose plan they select, and then contract directly with the architect for additional hourly work as needed. And the architect would carry the liability for the plans. This is an example of the pre-approved plans program in Seattle, and we're using this in addition to other work that's being done in San Jose and other jurisdictions as a model for inspiration. And since our program is going to exist across multiple jurisdictions, the Napa Sonoma ADU Center, our nonprofit, will house the plans for homeowners to select from on our website as a central hub. All jurisdictions engaged in the program will also have their own web pages as they desire, explaining the program and how it works specifically in their jurisdiction. And then that web page will link to the central hub of plans. So I think most folks here have some ideas about the potential benefits of pre-approved plans programs, and have probably also heard critiques that pre-approved plans programs may not always be the panacea that they seem like they could be in theory once they're implemented in practice. Our hope is that this program will reduce work for jurisdiction staff and also save costs for homeowners, as well as serve as an indicator for homeowners that ADUs are a priority in their jurisdiction and that it's digestible and feasible for them to pursue an ADU in Napa and Sonoma counties. As I shared, we're still smack in the middle of the co-design process for this program with the jurisdictions. And so I just wanted to share, kind of pull back the curtain and share with you a couple of the questions we're exploring with the jurisdictions right now. So first of all, we're wondering if one jurisdiction reviews and signs off on a plan submittal, will the other jurisdictions accept that submittal to the program, or can they decrease their time reviewing the submittal in some way if they know that it's already been signed off by another jurisdiction in the region? If so, this could save a lot of time on the part of jurisdictions in terms of approval of plans for the program. And then we're also looking at how we can potentially push the envelope beyond traditional pre-approved designs programs. So in our co-design work, we're currently seeking to identify if we can incorporate pre-approved foundation plans for typical soil types or other elements that could make for a more robust offering beyond just the architectural designs. So that's a brief overview of our current co-design work on pre-approved uniform plans across the multiple jurisdictions here in Napa and Sonoma counties. And I just want to take a moment to thank all of you for your time, and another thank you to our nonprofit's supporters. As I mentioned, we're a fiscally sponsored project of Napa Valley Community Foundation with support from Community Foundation Sonoma County and the cities of Napa and Calistoga and Napa County, among others. So I look forward to answering all of your questions later on today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Renee. This was, I think, really valuable lessons learned and great examples of things that other folks can consider. Before we get into the Q&A though, I want to make sure we get our presentation from the Sonoma County Planning Department folks. Are you guys ready, Katrina and Nina? All right, start with Katrina Braehmer from Permit Sonoma. Welcome. We look forward to hearing from you.
Hello, Renee. Thank you for all the kind words and the shout outs. And good morning to everybody. My colleague Nina and I are happy to share a bit about how the County of Sonoma is working to support small housing types. And before I jump into ADUs, I also want to thank Denise and Casita Coalition for inviting us to be part of this series, and will hopefully contribute some small amount to this broader discussion. So as you all are well aware, the state laws that went into effect at the beginning of last year were some of the more substantial changes to ADU law that California has seen in recent years. And for Sonoma County, the new laws meant a significant transformation of how we processed ADU permits. Prior to 2020, our ADU ordinance and its historical iterations had always required a ministerial zoning permit in addition to construction permits. We also had minimum lot size restrictions dependent on whether the parcel was served by public utilities or a well and septic system. If a lot didn't meet the minimum parcel size, we required a discretionary use permit, which meant staff time spent on the county's part and additional money and time spent by homeowners in order to build a second unit. So the removal of minimum lot size had a very meaningful impact on the permitting side of things, and it also expanded where ADUs could be built in the county. Then at the beginning of 2020, when the law was in effect, rather than rush to develop a new ordinance, we elected to delay a bit to figure out how to navigate state policy and how the relaxed restrictions would play out. I'll touch more on this decision a little bit later, but a highlight of going this route meant that our review of ADUs would simply default to state law. And what that means is that today, no additional planning permit is necessary for ADUs in the county, and they are permitted in nearly any zone where residential is allowed, including agricultural, residential, and mixed-use zones. And because we no longer have a valid ADU ordinance, we knew that the state law would be hard to digest for homeowners and other members of the public that are interested in building ADUs in the county. So we created a checklist incorporating the state requirements to help people through the permitting process and determine whether their ADU plans would meet development standards. So far, we found that the checklist for both ADUs and JDUs have been a really useful tool for the public. And then I'll speak more a little bit later to our hopes to create additional resources like this and implement process improvements in collaboration with Renee and the Napa Sonoma ADU Center that will further streamline ADU approvals. And then next, I'd like to briefly touch on how the changes to state ADU law have impacted our county's fire rebuilding process. So the experience of wildfire and the consequences of it on housing are not unique to Sonoma County, but the four major fire events in the last 4 years, with that, our community is still grappling with the rebuilding process and the challenges that come with that. After the 2017 complex fires, the county implemented the Resiliency Permit Center, or RPC, which is overseen by my department, Permit Sonoma, and exclusively dedicated to streamlining residential reconstruction permitting. With the frequency of fire events we've had in the last few years, the RPC has served as a semi-permanent fixture of our department that really helps avoid bottleneck of residential reconstruction among the steady stream of other development permits that we have going on. Prior to 2020, we really wanted to provide flexibility to fire survivors rebuilding their homes. So we had allowed property owners to build ADUs prior to constructing their homes. Then starting in 2020, the state law requires either an existing or proposed primary residence before an ADU can be built, which has actually had the unintended consequence of prohibiting fire survivors from building ADUs as interim housing before they build their primary. However, for those homeowners that may not be able to reconstruct their primary home just yet to the full scale that it was, for whatever reason, we've found a way to get around that requirement for a primary by encouraging people to build residences that meet ADU standards that they could later on designate as their ADU when they're ready to build their primary. And another way we've streamlined ADUs is that regardless of whether a property had an ADU before experiencing wildfire, all proposed ADUs within the fire perimeters of the last few fire events continue to be permitted through the Resiliency Permit Center, which highly expedites the process even further than required by the state. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we saw our choice to defer updating our local ADU regulations as a learning opportunity that would inform a future ordinance at some point. Now that we feel we've kind of reached that point, some of the high-level goals we have moving forward are to develop an ADU code that is strategically aligned with other county divisions that have review authority so that we harmonize the permitting process across the board, and also to continue to develop and provide resources that support an accessible and streamlined permit process for homeowners. So we have 2 initiatives in the pipeline right now, which are an updated ordinance and pre-approved ADU plans. For our ordinance, we're considering how to incorporate, where appropriate, more permissive provisions than the state's baseline, which may be informed by the ADU types we find people are most interested in building locally. And then another objective is to generally remove constraints to building ADUs, whether those be process related or more site specific and technical. And then we have 2 parallel pre-approval efforts happening right now. The first is our collaboration with the Napa Sonoma ADU Center and working with Renee on developing that multi-jurisdictional program. And the second is an internal pre-approval program development that our department is exploring and in the early stages of. This would be where the county would develop and own the plans and then offer them for free. So we're still contending with the kinks of how both programs will be structured and the level of pre-approval that we can offer given the physical diversity of sites that we have across the county. So we can't share too many lessons learned yet, but we're looking forward to continuing our work with Renee and the Napa Sonoma ADU Center and learning from our other local jurisdictions and figuring out how we can get the ball rolling on that. So next, I'm going to pass the baton to my colleague Nina, who will share a bit about cottage housing in Sonoma County.
Hi, thank you, Katrina, and thank you for driving while I do the presentation. So I, in the spirit of Casita Coalition's interest in small housing generally, we wanted to share with you all a new small housing type that we introduced into our code a couple of years ago called cottage housing developments. This was a series of housing initiatives that we had approved in 2018, partially in response to the loss of housing units due to the 2017 fires. And we basically introduced these to allow multifamily housing in traditionally single-family neighborhoods. So in this Sonoma County, it's the R1 low density and R2 medium density residential zoning districts. There's 2 types of cottage housing developments generally allowed. It's detached units that are clustered around common open space and parking areas, or not clustered around the parking, but that have common parking areas. And then we allow also multi-units development in an existing single family home. So attached units as a conversion, basically. Next slide. So this is just a little summary of the development standards that we apply to these projects. They have to be in areas with sewer and water, so they can't be out in rural areas that are dependent on well water and septic systems. And we also introduced a limitation on these types of developments in the areas most hardest hit by the fires. There was some concern that because of the number of vacant lots in those areas, that there could be an overconcentration of these types of developments. So, so they are limited in Larkfield area of near Santa Rosa and in Glen Ellen in Sonoma Valley. The basic set of development standards is 3 units maximum, and that they should all add up to roughly what the size of a single family home, the average size of a single family home in the R1 district is, which is 2,700 square feet. So they should average out to 900 each. Parking is 1 space per unit and 1 guest space. So we tried to be as permissive as we could there. And with all of our multifamily developments, vacation rentals are not permitted in cottage housing developments. Next slide. So they are intended to be processed with design review only if they meet those basic standards. If standards are not met, applicants may apply for a use permit. So that can include wanting to exceed the 3 unit maximum or the size limitation, or there is that density provision, so 1 per 2,500 square feet. And when the design review committee evaluates these, they're primarily focused on the kind of a cohesive design to the project, and that they roughly match the scale of the surrounding single family development. That's all for that. Next slide, please. So with all new provisions, there were certainly some lessons learned from our first iteration. And we found that there were very few sites meeting the criteria that were also vacant, so available for cottage housing development. We don't have a lot of areas that have sewer and water that are also undeveloped. And we didn't get a lot of interest in conversions, unfortunately, or we haven't yet. Another possible constraint was that it does allow quite a bit of flexibility on sites that are zoned R1, but in our medium density residential district, there's a lot of flexibility already allowed. So multifamily units are allowed there, and they already, most of the sites have at least a 6 acre minimum, 6 unit per acre density at minimum. So they can already do many different types of multifamily housing there. We also found that very few developers were interested in doing only 3 units. So most of the interest and few applications that we've gotten have been for more than 3 units and much larger than the 900 square foot limitation, which I guess is not surprising. Also knowing that if you just wanted to build a lot and sell it and you wanted 3 units on it, and you could do a single family unit with a ADU and a JDU with almost with no design review and very few hurdles. I should also mention that something that I didn't think of as I was preparing this, but these units are intended to kind of be 3 units in place of 1 larger unit, meaning the single family home that would normally be allowed in these neighborhoods. And yet the fees that they are charged are not sized that way. So these units would pay the same impact fees as, and sewer and water connection fees. All the things that the ADU law has addressed does not apply to these units. So there's still charged fees that would be charged on a single family home. And that's a multi-agency, multi-jurisdictional issue that, that we just haven't sorted out yet. So those are kind of the lessons learned from our first iteration that we hope to address someday. That's all I have.
Great. Well, thank you all very much. I think that there was just a huge wealth of really valuable ideas and information. The innovations you guys are working on are really exciting, and I think we will have a good Q&A session now. So I'd like to open it up to the other folks who will be participating in the Q&A with me. Jared Basler from Jared, why don't you introduce yourself? I want to get all of your credentials wrong. The godfather of granny flats at a minimum, as you can see this line in the background. Jared.
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Jared Basler. I'm co-founder of Maxable. Also chaired the ADU Coalition down here in San Diego, which is similar in nature to what the Casita Coalition is doing, but focus on a more regional level. And then, you know, at Maxable, we provide ADU education and design and connect homeowners with the right professionals for them. And in my own personal design, I've designed and permitted over 100 ADUs. So I've seen pretty much everything on the ground, at least down here in San Diego, Southern California area. So with the other panelists, you know, I have a lot of the kind of boots on the ground experience to see how these, you know, rules and regulations actually get implemented and whether they work in the field. So.
And I should say Jared is also on the Casita Coalition board with me. Last but not least, I'd also like to introduce Dori Gasenos from the Turner Center for Housing Innovation. Dori, do you just want to say a few words about yourself and your background in ADUs?
Yeah, hi, I'm Dori Ganetzos. I'm a graduate student researcher at UC Berkeley, representing the Turner Center and Center for Community Innovation, as we do a lot of shared research on all things ADUs. I also have a background working on ADUs in local government, most recently at the City and County of San Francisco, and I do consulting for a startup called Symbium, which also does some work in the ADU space.
Great, thank you. And then I believe that Scott Johnson will be joining Renee from Napa Sonoma ADU. So with that, I'd like to open it up to our guest panelists to see if any of you guys have a question to kick us off that you'd like to ask the panelists. I have my list, but I've talked a lot already, so I'm gonna let you guys ask your questions.
Yeah,
Jared,
so kind of piggybacking off of my presentation last month, talking about affordable ADUs, I really found the home match program that you're talking about, Renee, interesting. And I was wondering what you had mentioned that it's like a year enrollment or a yearly program. What kind of incentives or what kind of metrics are you looking at to kind of help keep homeowners in that program so you don't just get 1 year a affordable housing opportunity and then have it be something that trails off? So
Yeah, great question, Jared. So the answer is really simple, and it's not yet tested because we're about to roll out this program. But basically our hope is that when homeowners are living in their primary residence and renting out an ADU, they really care deeply about the human being who's living in that ADU being someone that they feel comfortable and get along with. And also a landlord who's renting out a single unit isn't interested in spending a lot of time, getting new tenants in there, like flipping tenants. And so our hope is that once they have someone who's a great match with them, who works out, who's there at a certain level of rent for a year, that they're just simply not going to kick that tenant out after a year or significantly increase that rent. And that's something that we've seen anecdotally here. And it remains to be seen how it works out in practice, but we feel pretty confident that after a year of this program that they'll go ahead and keep that same tenant there and not, put the rent up super high after that.
hey, I just want to make sure that that folks who are on the webinar know that they can submit questions that they'd like to ask the presenters through the Q&A function on Zoom. So if you have questions, if you please load them into the question and answer button on your Zoom screen, then that allows us to consolidate the questions and make sure that we get them answered as we're having the conversation today. Jared, I don't know, Renee, did you attend the San Diego session and hear about, Jared, would you just give it like a 30-second overview on how San Diego's approach to affordability compares, contrasts with Sonoma's approach? Because I think it's interesting that you guys are both aiming to make these available to lower income people, but you're using different mechanisms.
yeah, so the way that San Diego's handling it is a ADU bonus program. So for every deed restricted ADU that you build, you get one additional market rate. And within the transit priority areas, that's really unlimited. It doesn't mean that we're getting 30 ADUs on a lot. I did have someone who was on that webinar and came and asked me if they could do 18 ADUs on a 5,000 square foot lot. And I was like, probably not going to, but they took that unlimited very literally. So but the way it's really set up is that it's a 15-year deed restriction. So when we look at like the lengths of affordability agreements, trying to bring that down to a number that kind of pencils out on both sides. And then just the additional units that can be built in that program help that pencil out as well.
So in essence, if I could just summarize, the San Diego approach is to give you more density in exchange for a 15-year deed restriction, which is manageable under conventional financing for a homeowner. And the Napa Sonoma approach is to create financial incentives for a homeowner to participate in a program that discounts the rent for a period of time, with the belief, and so far lived experience being, that once you have a tenant that you like, you work to keep them if you're the homeowner, rather than jack the rent as high as you possibly can and face a constant turnover of someone who's living really in close quarters with you and your family. But I think it's interesting to see how these approaches differ and instructive for others. I'm a little curious, what did you guys do immediately after the fire? In the first 2 months after the fire, how were you able to use your own rules or your own regulatory scheme for ADUs to really have this be a disaster response tool? And that may be more of a question for Katrina. We still have Katrina with us?
Hey, I'm here. I wasn't actually with Sonoma County during the 2017 fires, which is really what kicked off the Resiliency Permit Center. So I wasn't there for that early stages of RPC, but yeah, I can say that I've heard anecdotally that being able to process all residential reconstruction permits through the RPC, whether that residential unit existed before the fire or not. So it's not just rebuilding, but it's building within those fire areas. That all goes through the RPC. And so I've heard great things from homeowners and fire survivors that have enjoyed the experience of having expediting permitting approval. We've got a lot of development still happening in Sonoma County, regardless of all of the layers of issues, fires, pandemics, whatnot. And lots of work to do. So having that remain as a fixture within our department, I think has been a huge support. And we can, as we move forward into a new ordinance, we're continuing to look at what types of resources we can provide specifically for, fire survivors. Hopefully we don't have another major fire event anytime soon, but we're continuing to look at how we can support specifically those homeowners and property owners that have experienced wildfire.
So just again, to kind of compare and contrast, it looks like expediting permitting and having very clear rules and a place to go if you're a homeowner makes a big difference in terms of their ability to get an answer and get something done quickly. And it's interesting that jurisdictions that are kind of leading the way find that to be incredibly important. And I found the programming, Renee, that you're doing around these are best practice guidelines for local governments about how they can align their mission statement, their website, their written material to create that expediting and clarity. Those are really great ideas. And as the Casita chair, one of the things I think we may do quickly is to find a way to work with you to share that out more broadly. I'm not quite sure how we'll do that yet. We'll follow up after this webinar, but I think that those were just incredibly practical, helpful steps that you've already thought about and can easily be shared around. So thank you for that, for both of you guys for making those things super clear. We do now have, now that I've reminded people to, or told people to put their questions in the chat function, we do have some questions. A couple of them have to do with particular rules, or for example, around pre-approved plans. One question was, what does it mean the architect carries the liability for the plans? Renee or Katrina, do you want to answer that? I can give like the 2-second, which is that somebody has liability for building a building. Typically it's the designer. And so the designer with the pre-approved plan still carries that liability, which exists no matter what. This is just being clear that it's not residing with the county because the county did the plan as a pre-approved plan. The liability and the construction drawings still flow to the architect. If that's a sufficient answer, we can keep going because I'm mindful of time. Another question was 2-story ADUs. So do you want to kind of talk about plan liability or how that works? And then also, do you allow 2-story ADUs?
Yeah, this is Renee. I'll just say the other question is kind of like, what is the benefit to architects? And just in brief, number one, an architect can take an ADU plan that they've already done the work on and submit it for approval as a pre-approved plan. And then they can sell that same plan multiple times. So the idea being design once, sell that plan multiple times. It's also just free marketing within the community. As I mentioned, we do a ton of outreach and marketing within the homeowner community in Napa and Sonoma Counties. And it also gives them a kind of quote unquote stamp of approval from the local jurisdiction, and hopefully leads to more work. So we've seen a lot of success with this in the other jurisdictions like Seattle that I mentioned, of architects being really interested in that. And then the question about 2-story ADUs, I think the answer is yes, but I'm wondering if Scott remembers in the city of Santa Rosa what the height limitations are. Do you remember off the top of your head, Scott? And if not, they're all listed on our website.
Yeah, not off the top of my head, but most of the jurisdictions do have some ability to do 2-story ADUs, and they can change the setbacks a little bit. They often step back for the second story, and sometimes there's a little bit more design review, from going from no design review to a little bit of design review if you go to a second story. It really depends on the jurisdiction, and like Renee said, we have that information on our website.
One generic question that's more of a statewide question is, are there other examples of cottage housing? I think as far as I personally know, Sonoma County is the thought leader in California in that space, as is the city of Los Angeles. City of Los Angeles right now is running a whole design guidance program around small lot subdivisions and architectural guidance for these small infill projects, not identical to, but similar in theme to what Napa Sonoma is doing. But I think, as Senator McGuire pointed out at the outset, duplex, triplex, quad zoning, planning, conversations, and the eruption of dialogue statewide about getting rid of single family zoning as having a history of redlining and racial equity exclusion intention behind it is an interesting, it's a development that is directly in response to Black Lives Matters and a whole number of social issues. And the fact that a lot of the people who are impacted most seriously by the housing crisis and the lack of homeownership in California are our workforce, many of whom are Black and brown and never had the same opportunity to own a home. So I think this is a new policy area for California, and local agencies, Sacramento, Los Angeles, Berkeley City Council voted to get rid of single family zoning. We'll see how that goes. I'm on the zoning board there. We'll see how that plays out. But I think it's all new. And this dialogue really has just begun in a meaningful way in the last year or two. So it's part of Casita Coalition's mission to encourage the dialogue, but I don't think that there's a huge pool of resources, of programs that have been on the ground, been working for a few years, and that have lessons learned that can be handed out the way there is with ADUs. ADUs was the first step in this small housing trajectory. Another question was Williamson Act contracts. You guys can jump in on the exclusionary zoning, more quad zoning if you want, but also can you talk about Williamson Act contract land and ADUs while we're at it?
So in Sonoma County, we have uniform rules for ag preserves and land conservation contracts. And ADUs are not permitted on lots subject to a Williamson Act contract. However, we do offer a number of agricultural housing types and subject to certain standards and conditions within the county. So we do offer, kind of a number of different types of housing within agricultural zoning. But other than that, we also have an ADU exclusion zoning overlay, which we've recently lifted off of a bunch of parcels. But other than that, they're pretty much allowed anywhere residential is allowed.
Great. Jared, do you have questions, or the other panelists?
Say,
have
Dory,
questions?
Dory, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I'm happy to hop in. So there's a question in the Q&A asking, in the experience of those present, what's the biggest obstacle developing ADUs from the perspective of the homeowner? Mini plug that UC Berkeley is coming out with the results of a statewide homeowner survey, answering a lot of these questions that should be available in the next month. But I was hoping to open this up to maybe Renee, since I know you're doing a lot of work on homeowner outreach, like webinar, homeowner support, etc. Do you have any lessons learned from your homeowner efforts that you'd like to share out, or any obstacles?
Yeah, absolutely, Dory. And I'm actually going to let Scott speak to that. But I also want to say that I'm so glad you mentioned that survey, because we partnered on that piece and made sure that there's going to be some hopefully really robust information for Napa and Sonoma counties. I think it's going to be really interesting, and I'm so glad that Turner Center is doing that. So over to you, Scott.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a great question. Since September 1st of last year, we have met with, I believe it's 124 homeowners in the Napa Sonoma area who are interested in ADUs. And we've given reports to 50 some odd at this point, and that number is increasing pretty rapidly. And so we get a chance, when we do these reports, we go out and visit with them for an hour and talk to them about their project and what their hopes and goals are and what concerns they have. So we've had a really good deep dive with a lot of homeowners, and primarily at this stage for people who are getting into it, it's a really opaque process for people who haven't been through it before. Who they should talk to about questions about septic or about their zoning, or the difference between a building department and a planning department is often all new material for homeowners who've never had to do a construction project. And so finding the right person to talk to, finding the right information that's relevant to them and their project has been a real big challenge for a lot of people. And when you're getting started and you don't have, you haven't paid for an architect yet, it isn't a project yet, it's really easy to put stuff off if it's that opaque. And so they put it off for 6 months, they put it off for a year. I've been talking to homeowners who've had an ADU plan in their head for 5 years, but they just never really got started because it's all that grit, there's no momentum behind the project. And so all that grit at the start can slow them up. Once they get rolling, then it's more of a matter of it becomes very project specific. It's for some people it's financing, finding a good financing program. For some people it's their particular utility situation is their biggest challenge during the construction project. Finding skilled labor, general contractors who will work at the ADU level and have a suite of carpenters, because carpenters and concrete guys are hard to find on the ground these days. So once they get rolling, the biggest problem or the biggest challenge for every homeowner seems to take on very specific characteristics of their particular project.
Great. I want to unpack a little bit the pre-approved plan program. Some questions that came in from lenders who are actually working with these. The question from Meredith Rupp at Loan Depot is, how did you decide on $1,000 fee for homeowners? Do designers have to plan check fees at the normal rates for the pre-approved plans? Any thoughts about homeowners wanting to customize the pre-approved plans and how that would be reviewed?
Great question. So that number is our starting point, and we're right in the middle of our co-design process. We're about to do focus groups with local architects and dig deeper into it. So it's not set in stone, but it's based on other models that we've seen that have been successful. And then if there's any additional work that the homeowner engages the architect or designer to do, that architect or designer would charge their normal hourly rate directly to the homeowner.
Great. Hey, one of the questions that came in is, how do you get trade contractors interested in ADUs, which are often seen as inferior to bigger, more complex projects? I think there's several answers to that. Among them, these are always going to be, or typically going to be one deal at a time kinds of projects, particularly where you're converting existing space. And those tend to be the domain of community-based contractors. The kind of, if your roof leaks, the kind of contractor you call to fix a roof leak or to fix your plumbing. The bigger building trades contractors that build bigger projects with greater unit density tend to build the bigger projects. But I think what's interesting is that even the big builders who hire those trades are starting to look at ADUs. So for example, home builders, some of the bigger home builders in the state, Lennar, 5 Point, are starting to add ADUs to their prototype models so that they are not only entitling a house, but a house plus an ADU. And those projects are all built by larger contractors. So, this is a whole new area of policy. And then another answer is that ADUs by some companies are starting to be built in factories. And some of those factories are starting to become unionized or have a more organized relationship with their workforce. So I think, we're at the dawn of a new industry in California, and it'll be 5 years before we can answer some of these questions, because I just saw a list today of like 20 companies building prefab housing in California, all of whom have a new ADU model. That didn't exist 3 years ago. And so it'll be interesting to see how it unfolds over time. Jared, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, and one thing that I think is really important, obviously, getting trade contractors involved is something that is going to, yes, it can help bring the cost down, but it can also create a more monopolized environment, where I think one of the great things about ADUs and being something that's homeowner driven is the fact that they really engage our community, and they engage into that the economies of our local communities. And so when we talk about equity and we talk about the things that we want to make sure that we're building moving forward, it's really giving opportunities to those local contractors to get involved in the space.
Great.
That's similar to what we're seeing is for homeowners who are looking for contractors who find contractors, it really becomes a question of the right sized contractor. As you were saying, Denise, a lot of the bigger players, it's too small of a job unless they've got 6 of them lined up in the same community. But the community sized contractors, the guys, who have a crew of 3 or 4, that seems to be a really solid market for contractors to take on this and become ADU specialists in their own communities. And and the word of mouth is a lot of the ADU people are talking to each other. So word of mouth for the community contractors, as they start to become experienced in ADUs, they have a lot of work, more work than they know what to do with.
And I'll just jump in on that as well to say that we saw some success coming out of the Tubbs fire in Santa Rosa with homeowners in a neighborhood or area banding together to engage builders on a scaled basis to rebuild homes together in the same area. And a lot of those homes also included ADUs. And that was an incentive for those builders to come because of efficiencies of scale. And so one of the other reasons that we've developed these Facebook support groups for homeowners in certain jurisdictions, and something that we're looking at is, can we as a nonprofit with a systems lens across multiple jurisdictions and within jurisdictions help homeowners who are at a similar stage even come together to engage builders within a neighborhood or an area to build multiple ADUs at once?
I think that this notion that this is going to scale and there are lots of ways to get there is a really important idea that we'll hang on to as we move into future webinars. I want to thank, we're at our time, and I want to be respectful of folks. Thank you so much to the presenters for joining us. Thank you very much to Senator McGuire for an inspirational kickoff speech. Thank you to our panelists, Dory and Jared, for asking good questions, and Scott and the panelists for being available to answer them. I want to invite folks to join us for our next webinar, which will be, our webinars are the Friday, last Friday of each month from 11 to 12:30. Our next webinar on March 26th will be with the City of San Jose with a keynote address by Mayo Liccardo, who's been a real housing hero in San Jose. You can register for the webinar by clicking on the Casita Coalition events page through our website, or going to Eventbrite and searching Casita Coalition ADU. And then finally, many of you are members of the Casita Coalition already, including many of our panelists and interviewers, but I'd invite you all who are not to please join us and like us, follow us, and share us on your social media platforms, including Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Join the Casita Coalition through our website. There's an easy to follow join button, because our work together is really important and has already been transformational in the housing outcomes in California. And we invite you all to join us in making small homes a big part of California's future by joining the Casita Coalition and becoming a member. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're grateful for your membership, your participation, your thought leadership, and your time. Stay safe and have a good weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.